Shepard, first of all, thank you for having me. And I would like to say this. This is not a celebratory moment. I just don't feel that. But what I do feel is the magnanimity of this moment, as you have kind of laid the groundwork to see police do the right things and step up and violate or go beyond the thin blue line. This is accountability, but it's not victory. And what I mean by that is that it's a low bar when we can watch a human being killed on video camera and we're celebratory and we're excited at the fact that the person that did it is held accountable. That's the low bar. That's something that we should be doing.
It's a bar we haven't crossed that I can remember in quite some time, Ralph.
Absolutely. And I don't diminish it at all, but I'm sober in the fact that we have so much more to do relative to criminal justice reform, but also in reimagining what policing looks like in black and brown.
Give me a vision for that.
I would say,
you're a former police chief in a black and brown city that's seen more than its share of turmoil over the past decades. The city of Detroit and other black and brown cities across the country. What would be your dream for how we change policing? We can't get rid of police. Nobody seems to really want that.
Right.
We got to make changes. What are they?
Well, I think substantively, we really have to look at how officers are compensated. There cannot be a financial incentive for writing a ticket. There can't be overtime for showing up in court. We have to compensate officers, number one, at a rate that is commensurate with the risk and the responsibility that they hold. The second thing is we have to stop over-policing and utilizing pretext stops to engage black and brown communities, because you have two traumatized entities. You have a traumatized electorate or constituency that black and brown people have a different fear and trauma when they see red and blue lights in their rearview mirror. And then you have officers, quite frankly, that are traumatized. And you have heard it said before, sometimes people see it as an excuse, but officers feared for their life. Well, if you have two traumatized groups coming together and the initial stress response in either, which is physiological, is fight, flee, or freeze, 2 out of 3 don't work well for a black individual dealing with police officers, if you fight or if you flee. And as we have seen, the number of black and brown Americans killed that ultimately were not armed, were not committing offenses that would even remotely come close to a death penalty. Yet we see a Dylan Roof, we see a Kyle Rittenhouse that have done and verifiably done very horrific crimes, and they come into custody with no issue.
Well, how do we train police to be better at de-escalation? Because there's one observation you can make without opinion, and that is there was no de-escalation that seemed to be in play here.
That's absolutely true, Shepard. And where it seems to be a lack of de-escalation, it seems to be when people are dealing with black and brown communities. And we can't even say it's just white police officers, because that would be patently unfair. If you look at Freddie Gray in Baltimore, half of the officers indicted were African American. So it's a systemic issue. And when we talk about systemic racism, I think we have to be more nuanced in our explanation so people understand it. And we're not saying all white people are racist, but there are systems in place that do not inure to the benefit of black and brown people, policing being one of them. So how we address, and again, going back to the pretext stops, if we are to believe some of the reports with Dante Wright, there was a hanging air freshener that precipitated that stop. That is an explosive situation that never should have taken place if we start to take back some of the discretion that we have just given unfettered to police officers, because it is not applied equally in all communities. So, Shepard, there are some very tangible, solid things we can do, but I think it's going to take a clear mandate and national effort, because I just think as a country, we cannot survive many more of these encounters where black people die at the hands of police.
Is there a message for police officers who are good police officers, who really are there to protect and serve, who are now concerned that they won't have the protections that good police officers who protect and serve deserve?
And Shepard, I would counter that with, you don't see good police officers on trial for having their knee on someone's neck for 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And one way we have lost complete credibility with the public is that thin blue line. We tell the public all the time, because there's a no snitch culture. Don't, and we try to break that. If you want your community to be safe, you have to turn in your criminals. And we are so hypocritical when we say that, when we hold on to our own criminals simply because they wear a badge and carry a gun. So we have to be much more courageous. We have to have officers be like Chief Arredondo, who has set a standard, and his police department has set a standard, and we cannot go backwards. So that's the way we change the culture, because the culture is so entrenched in that thin blue line. Good officers don't have to worry about this. This is a seminal moment from the standpoint of, this is the first step in a 1,000-mile journey. And I'm encouraged by that. But again, very sober, because knowing we still have tons of work to do.
You know, Ralph, it was not a small thing for a police chief to testify in the way that he did. We heard Ben Crump and others, speak to this. It wasn't a small thing for the training officer to do that. None of these were small. The new thing, no matter how great, it's hard for many people to do. It didn't appear difficult for those two particular men, but it is worth noting. And I wonder if you think that there could be incidents where a police officer did the wrong thing, maybe did so with malice, maybe even with forethought, where in other police departments across the country, we might see this same sort of shift now. Could this be a beginning?
Shepard, it is a beginning. And let's not underestimate what it did when Chief Arredondo did what he did, because I think it set the tone, first of all, for his troops, and emboldened them to be courageous, to be moralistic, and to show character and integrity and stand up for what's right in law enforcement. So from that standpoint, it's a great start. This is our real issue as a country. We have 18,000 plus police departments with 18,000 disparate ways of how they have a culture in their policing. So that's why there has to be part state intervention, part local intervention, but there has to be a huge national push to incentivize officers doing just like the officers of Minneapolis did. And they have a lot to be proud of. And we as a country, we have to take that as a cue, and it has to be the start of changing the dynamic in all 18,000 police departments.
Ralph Godbey, former police chief in Detroit. Ralph, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.